word is literally.
No, what I can put that in German. Probably just don't maybe. That's just by the part. Like Staubsauger. Vacuum cleaner. Staubsauger is just dust sucker.
Yeah. Like that.
Yeah, we do have some.
I think you see some of the words.
That's true. You can make.
Yeah.
When do I have to go to the main stages? You have to go to the main stage.
You're not like it, no? This Memorial Day. It's also a holiday. Is it a holiday? Last week.
This week, Thursday, Friday.
Thank you too.
Like it. Why I wasn't like it. Choose from lounge music. Oh, sorry, no. Things from Ariam. Best slow rock. That's all. That
That's the Zoom that you just gave me?
Yeah, I just want to with some people to check if I start resume sharing, what you're gonna be watching.
See it.
Can you see the main?
You want to focus.
So if I am focused, You see my avatar now. Yes.
We're looking at that one screen.
This big enough?
Yep. Nice.
That's where I am.
I would like to see.
Just have a light, but I just want to say that was before what I was doing. But now I'm the corner. Yeah.
I just want to some people to check if
What can I do then?
You route the sound.
I don't know how to do it.
You're gonna route the sound in the propeller.
Just stop the screen sharing. Now start the screen sharing. Start it again. Just click on the start share screen. There. Just go on. Yeah, you need to check the share sound box.
Okay.
Then you should be able to mute yourself or to say you don't want to. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. We're getting excited to see Caitlin KRAUSE here on the virtual campus, our opening keynote. She should be here any second. Oh, she's here. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Hi, wow.
Hello.
Here I am. Hello. How are you? It's good to see you. You're looking quite dapper. This is great.
Thank you.
So, testing audio. How does it sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, if you prefer headphones, I do have them on hand. And let's see. Yeah. Do you want me to put my slides in the middle or leave this here while you do the introduction? There's a little bit of audio lag for me, but I think my system has nothing else running, so it should be pretty quick. Yeah, how do I look to you, Jonathan? We're in a cone of silence with you. I can't hear you anymore. Now
Sorry about that. I had to change. I was in the same room as where they're running the Zoom screen.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm getting some feedback on my own piece here. Just a second. I'm going to run and get some. I'll be right back.
Okay. Beautiful. So I'm looking at the chat and just doing a quick audio check while we wait for Jonathan to come back. So feel free to put in the chat or unmute yourself. How do I sound? Pretty good? Otherwise, I have headphones nearby.
Sound good to me?
Yeah,
you
sound great.
You sound great.
Thank you. Thanks, Daphne, too. Lovely. Oh, this is so great. I've been looking at all of the controls so I can make gestures and everything. So although
Yes.
I'll try not to break out in a dance during the middle of the talk. I know that one.
How about me? Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound okay. There's a little bit of a lag sometimes, but I'm not sure if that's me. It could be our time difference. Now there's not. So.
Okay, good.
So would you like my slides up in the middle, or do you want me to wait for your intro here?
Oh no,
Go
go
ahead. Put them up.
Okay.
I don't think I showed you how to make a bookmark before.
I learned.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, you're having some feedback when you talk. So are you wearing headphones?
I put head. Yes, I am wearing headphones. But I hear myself doing that too. I can't stand it.
Let me try one thing.
Check. Nope, still the same. Better?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Why don't you test again? Now I have headphones in too, so we can see maybe I was picking you up. Let's see.
Oh.
Raphael's gonna type and let us know.
Yeah, it sounds better to me.
Sounds better to me too. How are we now?
It's better now. You guys, you sound you sound very well now.
Depending on the room to give us our cues. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. All right, we're set now. Check.
All right. Well, shall I introduce you then, Caitlin?
Sounds great.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so excited for this. This is our opening keynote for the Immersive Learning Research Network 8th International Conference in Vienna and here in Virbela on our iLRN virtual campus. And I am pleased to be able to introduce Caitlin KRAUSE. Caitlin teaches digital well-being by design at Stanford University, and she founded the XR studio Mindwise in 2015. She takes leaders and impact makers to their next level of well-being and innovation with her unique approach to wonder, awe, and creative flow hacking called Mindwise Flow Camp. Her practices helping people optimize flow performance, metaverse fluency, and tech relationships will be an ideal way for iLRN 2022 to frame together our common goals and challenges. So we're really happy that Caitlin's here. I have been talking with Caitlin and we've been co-conspiring about all kinds of things, and I absolutely cannot wait for this presentation. I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to you, Caitlin. Thank you so much. It's all yours.
Thanks so much for that warm invitation to be here, and also the introduction here on stage. It's a thrill to be here in front of people after so much anticipation. So I am so happy to be here. Wondering if I'm going to move around while I talk, so just get used to. Here I have a DJ set up. It does feel like this is quite a kickoff to this conference that spans both virtual and in person, which is part of my philosophy, just that we exist beyond the containers of separate spaces and spheres. We have one integrity. So we'll be talking about that today, a bunch of other things. Feel free if you want to put ideas in the chat. There will be time afterwards for us to talk and take questions, things like that. So yeah, feel free to ask questions. There will be a section at the end. And just checking before I start, there's a little bit of a like a sound that comes through my speakers. So I'm just wondering if you can hear me clearly, or if there's a little bit of a blip every so often. I might be getting an alert when someone enters the room or something like that. Just want to make sure it's clear. Okay, super. So what I really wanted to do today to start, because I'm often so excited to be in different places, spaces, I've been traveling a lot myself, is I wanted to just take time to take a breath and acclimate. And I'm inviting you to do this with me, because if you're like me, you're, showing up sometimes on different channels, different screens, and sometimes it feels like it's just from the neck up. So I remind myself all the time, this is me in a guided session with Tom Furness, where we were underwater having a group exercise that was meditative. I'm often giving myself time to arrive. So today, in the spirit of the beginning of this iLRN conference together, just giving an extra moment for us to check in with ourselves. This is another session, a picture of a workshop I was leading with drawing and expressive, different creative storytelling. And it's a reminder to refresh all of our senses as we arrive in a place, just taking in the environment, looking around festive space, seeing you here, and just taking a moment to take a deep breath in and see if we can feel our feet. My cue to arrive and to really show up in different places is to tune into the feeling of my feet. So if you'd like to with me, I'm going to take a deep breath in. Just let my lungs fill with air, and then exhale and relax my shoulders a little bit and just arrive. As I take another breath in, tuning my senses to the soles of my feet. Really taking a moment to give back some gratitude to my feet for showing up, carrying me many places, for all it takes to be who we are in body and in digital form. Giving back a little grace to yourself as we start today together. And with the last breath in through the nose and exhale through the mouth, just inviting you, if you'd like to make any intention for the beginning of this time together. Maybe it's a word, an emotion, feeling. Naming an intention for ourselves about how we want to greet this opportunity to learn and share together. That's a little bit of how I show up in a space, because so often we're moving so fast. And Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away earlier this year, but still feels very present in my world, he reminds us to smile, breathe, and go slowly. So sometimes in events like this, I remind myself, take time to enjoy it, to smile, to breathe, to look at people and really see them. So today we're talking about some very deep topics, topics like resilience and adaptive intelligence and creative capacity. But how can we have these if we don't show up with ourselves first? So for me, I'm somebody who has been a curious learner throughout my life. I've traveled around the world. I learned through storytelling. I was a photographer and still am. And a lot of these are pictures that I've captured in different spaces and places around the world. And really through having that global experience of storytelling and experience, really spending time noticing the details in spaces, it gives me a chance to really feel like I deepen my presence for the applications I produce in XR. So just a question to you, when you feel disconnected, what do you do to reconnect? what do you do to fill your wellspring? For me, a lot of it involves that curiosity-driven storytelling and sharing and learning through art and photography. And feel free, if you want to put in the chat, if you have a go-to thing that you do or that you keep as part of your practice that brings you back to yourself. One of my heroes is Parker Palmer. He wrote The Courage to Teach, and he has programs in leadership that I've been a part of. And he phrases it as what makes you come alive. You know, and I think a lot of us are in fields where we're breaking barriers and we're taking risks. So it's nice to remember those practices that we have that bring us back to ourselves. So I love reading this, Jonathan. Hiking, people having time in nature. Yeah, leading to hearing more of myself. Beautiful. Travel. So for me, you've seen this picture on the previous slide, but I often also go hiking or go into nature as a feeling of reconnection. And it was that impulse that really led me to this idea of multitudes and how often I wanted to show up as my full self and needed to merge those worlds. Like you'll see a lot of my appreciation for nature shows up in the creativity and the applications in XR. So I grew up as somebody that felt like I had many different labels and didn't fit into one box. And if you're like me, maybe Austin Kleon's book Steal Like an Artist, you know, that might appeal to you. This idea of being what some people call a multipotentiate. Like, how can we be scientists and artists at the same time? How can we be researchers and also people who love to just tell stories around a virtual campfire? So my own exposure to how to create that intersectional design in communities comes from my feeling of not wanting to be boxed in by one label. So this is my own identity journal of the way that sometimes I'm labeled. And as we talk about resilience and we talk today about creative capacity, part of this is noticing the details of differences and intersections and people's creative capacities that keep us stronger as a community. So how can we show up as ourselves? Again, this is a little bit about me. I've been a curious learner my whole life. I founded a company in 2016 that really was based on values over application. When I founded MindWise, I'd been teaching for 2 decades, and I knew that the people that I was teaching didn't want to be boxed in either. So MindWise had a goal really of empowering meaningful human connection and using technology as a bridge. So using it as a way to connect person to person with a lot of embedded creativity and well-being. Because if we don't meet our well-being needs, we can't really show up as ourselves in these spaces. So I feel really grateful for the journey, and part of this opportunity today is to talk about how we create meaningful learning experiences, how we share, and how we can increase our sense of resilience and creative capacity. So I've been polling people all over the world. I've been asking people, what do you think about your own learning experiences? And if you had to describe it, if you could pick maybe a memory of a teacher that made an impact or a learning experience that was especially salient for you, where you took away something of value, you know, how would you describe it in a word or two to other people, what it felt like to be in that space? And if you feel like it, you can put it in the chat here. Usually in learning spaces that are present for me, there's some kind of kindness underneath in the environment. Yeah. Thinking about that. Right. Yeah, I'm reading Cynthia's collaboration, someone who valued me. So I've been polling a lot of different ages, a lot of different groups of people, and it seems like across the board, the common answers are something to do with this. So these aren't summative, but the trends tend to be that spaces that make us come alive, that involve learning and expansion, still have that emotional connection at the core. So there's some kind of duality, this paradox of creating safe spaces to take risks. How do we go beyond? How do we have that plasticity, that resilience, without this foundation? So I'm looking, and I'm going to save the chat here and add some of yours to my research, because it's so powerful when you realize the impact that we can have too as leaders who shape learning spaces across divisions of digital and physical. There's so much happening right now that is exciting. So I came back to my mission, reinforced, okay, empowering humanity through meaningful connection. This is part of my journey that I'm sharing today with all of you, because that foundation of knowing that the learning spaces and the expression needs to be compassionate and caring at the core. And then you have virtual reality, and back to my feeling of coming alive in nature. Virtual reality and XR applications, I immediately fell in love with the ability that they have to bring me to a place in space. So that idea of being there, that fullness of presence, that feeling of wholeness, that's what I fell in love with. Chance for all of this to come alive in a virtual space. So today, as we think about what I will call a form of AI, adaptive intelligence, not artificial, how do we increase our chance for presence and expression and all of that connection that leads to resilience and creativity coming alive? I'm exploring some of these with you, and as you have some thoughts, again, please keep putting them into the chat. Create that dynamic. I'm going to just take a moment to name that, even as it's so aspirational as I name all of these topics that we're talking about, we're also meeting the moment right now, naming that it's a difficult time, and that also motivates the work that we're doing. So to be resilient, to have this adaptive intelligence, to have creativity, in the face of what is mental health and well-being crisis. I'm speaking to you at the end of the month of May, and May is in America the National Mental Health Awareness Month. And I do track the statistics. I look at the real gravity of the situation right now across all age groups. And this is worldwide. If you look at the World Health Organization, it's been a difficult time for people as communities, as societies around the world. And, so looking at what's really going on as we semi-emerge, but yet there's a persistence in response to pandemic, what that does to our system, biological system, our mental health, our social well-being. And maybe you can relate to this. It can feel hard sometimes just to make simple decisions. I was reading statistics that say here 1 in 3 Americans say they're sometimes under so much stress that it's hard to decide what to wear or what to eat. And there's a level of uncertainty that can be really unsettling. So I'm naming that because in the midst of this uncertainty, that can create a feeling that that really calls out for more well-being, more focus on how we can build some sense of capacity and wholeness, not as denial, but as naming this emotion right now that we're feeling, and working together to support each other. So, in the midst of all of this, in the studies of US respondents, most people have a positive outlook. More people are looking at how we tend to bounce back after hard times, which is one definition of resilience. So really naming that right now is a difficult time, and we're not alone in naming that. And in my worlds, it can feel like this, emotionally jumping from meeting to meeting. It can feel like there's some sense of busyness and rushing. We also live in a culture that sometimes reinforces being very busy as meaning that our work is important. And yet we all seem to crave experiences that feel like this. So sometimes when I build worlds and they're in virtual reality or some level of WebXR, I'm thinking about that impulse to create more space, one of my hobbies is kayaking. I love being on a large, wide lake and being able to just drink in with my senses all of the nature around me and become part of it. We're not in nature, we are nature. So how can we bring that sense to the creations that we have, that intention for well-being, as we're moving from, we're already in the experience age, we've passed the information age, we're building experiences for people to feel something and to collaborate together and feel invited, back to all those values that were at the beginning. And for me, as we have this M-word metaverse coming about and people are talking about spatialized experiences, I remember that it's really special because it brings me in presence. It brings me in complete surroundscape with other people, sharing, able to be creative. Yeah, having that internal connection meet the external. Yeah, and I love Stephen Kotler. He's a writer, and one of his quotes is "Flow is creativity in 360." So, and Stephen has yet to discover fully virtual reality. So it's like there's all kinds of invitations there to think about. Get into flow in a little bit. Yeah, so maybe one of the practices that I encourage in myself is curiosity. So that discovery being part of the journey as opposed to summative, it's more formative. I let my curiosity guide me, and that's partly how I discovered virtual reality. And then I have these values underneath that I'm looking to bring about through what I do. So virtual reality and immersive experiences, feeling surrounded by something in 360 is nothing new. I think we look back to a lot of the cave paintings at Lascaux and other places, the storytelling that surrounds us. As humans, we've wanted this type of connected experience, I think, throughout history of our society. So I look back and it's no doubt that we've wanted to have this democratized experience and some kind of connection even before the technology was at the stage that it's at right now. I love Monet's Water Lilies exhibit. This is at the L'Orangerie Museum in Paris. And Monet felt that it was important for the people who were experiencing his art to be immersed in the artwork. So he designed this gallery specifically to make sure that people could sit in the center and just feel a sense of calmness and presence and connection. He was deeply affected by the war. So the First World War was a heavy time, and he created this installation in response to that to give people a sense of wellness. And he didn't live to see it created, but he was very specific about the curved walls and the way it should surround people. And you can sit there today and feel that intention. And to me, that is a form of the virtual reality, the 360, the surrounding of something that envelops your senses. So I know a lot of us were familiar with some of these pieces. I still love looking at the old Viewmaster and some of the devices that have predated now, thinking of the sensorama, the ways that we can create spaces of wonder. And as the devices advance, it's exciting to think about the way that the future is going to be in terms of the hardware. We're moving to a ubiquitous computing world where I think this intention, these values underneath, they're going to make all the difference, because everything will be a little more streamlined, more intuitive, and we don't know exactly, but we're doing a lot of testing right now with how it looks, how it feels, what the emotional experience is like with the material you have. And so back to curiosity, as these devices have advanced, my photography experience led me to become a photojournalist, to do a lot of different work with storytelling and surrounding 360 images, which turned into more of that VR development of story worlds. So along the way, my discoveries were that regardless of device, this idea of using objects and environments and places as story vehicles, this empowers that meaningful human connection. So that was part of my learning journey, falling in love with XR and really learning about spatial environments and how they're a little bit different than traditional storytelling, of course, and invite people into worlds where they become the hero. So you'll hear me talk a lot about the hero's journey and the XR hero's journey because we play mentors, oftentimes inviting people to experience these worlds and see themselves as the hero and have different agency and connection. So I feel strongly about this opportunity right now. And yeah, so VR and XR are definitely visceral. They're all sensory. We sometimes feel them in our gut. We feel it, we connect deeply. And right now there's so much opportunity to celebrate this moment and how it really increases our sense of connection, brings us back to ourselves, serves as that vehicle for well-being and wonder. These are some scenes of worlds that I've created in VR and XR, you know, looking for that level of collaboration and co-presence. And sometimes they lead us into outer space. I always wanted to be an astronaut, and now in certain ways, even though my eyesight is not good enough and couldn't go through the whole astronaut training program, I can still drop into other worlds and feel like I have a sense beyond myself. And people who have been in collaboration together in XR, you know that magic, that feeling of being able to connect beyond boundaries. You know, here this is a global conference, and this week we're going to be celebrating that in different ways too. So I don't take it for granted, that accessibility to other people, to their stories, and the chance to actually practice what we're learning together. So this is a presence pyramid that I was creating based on research. You know, really the chance to do something and to experience it firsthand is what makes it most meaningful, salient, memorable. So right now, the research that's come out in the recent past have shown the benefits of VR learning. I know that in here, and I include XR as well. This is a PwC study, and I know in here we're familiar probably with the research that points to the emotional connection that people feel when they have some VR XR experience that brings them closer to each other. Some people would say that social emotional learning is a separate topic. I think that it should be baked into the experiences that we design and have, because the emotional connection is so rich in XR environments. And it's exciting to look at the studies that are pointing to this possibility lately of using VR and XR in different ways, and maybe making it, to me, it's not either or. People will say, oh, are we advocating to disappear completely into metaverses? And I say, no, actually, these experiences connected in XR make me appreciate physical connection as well. And definitely with nature involved in it makes me even more impassioned about caring for our planet and connecting with each other and feeling motivated to really look at missions and objectives in creative ways. So I think when we look at neuroscience and the way that the brain works, having that sense of possibility, that sense of scope and excitement can really animate our senses and then help us get back into a creative state to problem solve, to address a lot that we're motivated toward, but sometimes can feel isolated from in our physical worlds. And the chat is very exciting, I have to say. I'm looking at what people are putting there, and I believe so wholeheartedly in these missions, especially right now as we're at this stage. It's exciting, and yet, you know, it's a real time right now for intention to drive us, and not to just go gently into that good night and not think about the impact of our choices. So really this idea of agility, talked about adaptive intelligence, but keeping ourselves and our minds feeling fresh and feeling as if each new encounter is something to discover, something to enjoy for itself, for the formative journey, but looking at the intelligences and how our XR worlds are really animating the chance to develop our adaptive intelligence, which means that we're embracing change. We're embracing that level of uncertainty that we talked about before. I've been doing trainings in what I call metaverse fluency, because it's like a language. It's a different set of choices. So it involves maybe reshaping our brain and our expectations about what we would like to have as our outcomes from these experiences. One of the recent projects I was part of was converting the Smithsonian Open Access collection, some of their scanned artifacts, into a more experiential change from the typical museum experience that you would have with these beautiful artifacts. So a team and I created a game. We created a scavenger hunt where people could discover objects, learn about them, and have a social emotional connection along the way. So having these examples of what's coming out and how teams can create not just games, I mean definitely games, but some level of projects, peers, play, and passion. I think Seymour Papert said those were the 4 Ps that should be part of learning. So I'm thinking a lot about that design when I build an experience. This is a Wonderland experience that has logic puzzles as part of the environment, and it's all WebXR. And when we were building it, we were thinking, how can we create that curiosity, that animated storytelling that leads people into states of wonder and delight as they're learning. So underneath this resilience and adaptation, I think, is a human impulse to experience wonder, to experience flow. So it led me to research more about the emotion of wonder and learn more about how we can design environments that really fuel and support a feeling of wonder and awe. It's a very special kind of consideration right now. Wonder, they say, fires in the brain equally to the levels of anger, but it's the opposite side of the emotional spectrum. So how can we increase a chance of connection and maybe a sense of seeing beyond ourselves? No doubt sometimes we enter XR spaces and our mouths drop open, which is a sign that the body is open to some kind of experience that is going to change us in some way. So when I was writing the book, Designing Wonder, I was looking at all of the design strategies and considerations we can have when we create experiences in VR and XR. And thank you everybody who's been part of these experiences. I'm looking out at the audience here, and we exist beyond worlds. I have to just pause for a moment to appreciate each of you, because not only are we here right now together, some of you were here at the book launch on the screen. When I wrote a book, it was in the middle of the pandemic. We couldn't get together in person to have a book launch, but it was better and actually fulfilled in person to have it be inside of virtual reality. So having this book launch in AltSpace was a beautiful way for people to connect from around the world and have an environment that felt like, I mean, who could imagine standing on a book to do a book launch and having the audience take part, and everybody was sharing their input and researchers connected. This is what is happening here at the beginning of this week. You're already, I'm sure, feeling that passion together of like-mindedness that brings us around a topic and lets us share and learn more. So elements of wonder can lead us in directions that are liberating, freedom-inducing. Yes, collaborative spaces. I love that, Genevieve. As I was researching more about wonder, just want to share with you, if anyone here is curious about wonder, let's drop into deeper conversations. Right here, I started to research and realized that wonder itself is a word that can mean many different things. So it can mean different levels of curiosity and trying to figure out something, like I wonder why. It can also mean an existential sort of loss of identity and feeling of both a grandeur and also a sublimation of the senses. So people throughout history have been using different practices in wonder to lead them in creative exploration when they have more sense of openness and delight. So I started looking at what I was codifying as 5 facets of wonder, whether it was a wonder of attention that's intentionally placed on a topic, sometimes an expansion beyond ourselves, which can be an empathy exercise in wonder. The surfing wonder quality, that facet, has to do with sometimes hypnagogic states, states of just riding a wave of your own creativity and your own mind impulse, like way leading unto way. And some people have these states right when they wake up in the morning or right when they fall asleep. Before they fall asleep, they're in this state of less analysis and more openness to, let's say, that lateral thinking that can sometimes create really special connections. So parts of this, the research would go back into history, looking at William James, some of his research, some of the practices that were even before we have XR devices. But if you interview a lot of creative people, they tend to have some kind of practice that links to wonder. And we'll talk more about this. Wonder and awe is one of my favorite facets. The overview effect, the feeling that astronauts have as they're gazing on planet Earth, that feeling of deep reverence and connection beyond borders, and also a feeling of smallness, just being surrounded by something that's so big. The last facet, I'm still kind of diving into more deeply. I've called it wonder of the Gestalt because it has to do with the wholeness being greater than the sum of the parts. Sometimes you arrive different places, maybe you've had this feeling, everything seems to fit together. It's a system that seems to work together in a way that leads to wonder because it's so familiar to you, and you have this this feeling of deep belonging. So as we think about wonder and diving in there, this picture was from, let's see, 4 days ago, I think, as we a group that I was leading a workshop with went up to the moon's surface, and we were looking at planet Earth and feeling that wonder in XR and collaborating together. So much fun. And certainly the memories are more meaningful when we have a lot of experiences together that we're sharing as we're learning. And I've also created learning experiences on the moon in WebXR. So this is a picture together at one of the celebrations we were having with the Apollo 11 landing module behind us. So again, thinking about that creativity and that sense of wonder and possibility, also linking to a state of flow. So forming that plasticity of mind can involve being in a flow state. And if you're familiar with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi with his research, some of these flow states also seem to have a lot in common with what we're developing in XR. So even though Csikszentmihalyi was not specifically focused on VR, XR, and experience design, it feels to me as if they have complementary signatures. So looking at being in a creative state, being in, of course, it's transient. I don't believe in being in flow state all the time. I think that's a lot. So so we do have a certain cycle, you know, and we're developing rituals, we're developing patterns. Part of this is knowing how to really encourage states of flow and states of possibility, and also give ourselves time when we're not in flow, we're not having a challenge skills balance, we might just need some downtime. So really cycles, and part of that design is what I'm interested in right now. You know, I've developed a lot of different programs that look at states of flow and wonder. And as humans, as we're showing up as our full selves, again, back to the mission of connection, I think it's something that's not solitary. So these storied experiences that we're having together, whether it's in XR, whether it's in person, for me, through the experiences in creativity, I started to lead programs last year, creatively together. Expressive artwork has been part of it. The artwork of storytelling and creation being something that might be symbolic and not literal. How can we be together in shared spaces and have journeys that are expressive, informative, and delightful? This is also a space called the Flow Camp Moon Garden. I've been developing a lot of different worlds under a whole map called Flow Camp, where people can have experiences in creative flow. And sometimes those journeys lead people to want some solitary time. And I know in the chat when we were talking about what brings you back to yourself, sometimes it's social, and sometimes it's space just to have a reflective moment. Yeah, so how can we encourage more of this? As I develop virtual moon gardens and spaces of delight that encourage play, I'm thinking a lot about the feeling and the emotional sensibility. And it can be very low poly, it can be very playful. This is a WebXR world that is another instance of the moon garden, where groups have gotten together on a web browser for open meditations that I'll lead, or for creative sessions that we want to tell. We've had poetry readings here. I recently gathered a group together and had a well-being event. And it's amazing what you can do when your focus is in a space. I think part of this has to do with actually opening up opportunities for our senses to drop in, for us to show up, and us to enhance our intention and attention. Yeah, and such an explosion of curiosity and people wanting to do this. In the past month, these are snapshots from 4 experiences that I've been leading with well-being as the focus. It's National Mental Health Awareness Month, and the upper left is in person. So I was on Stanford campus in person, led a digital workshop about how we can encourage our senses to show up in physical form first. So it was a 3D consideration, looking at the Papua New Guinea sculpture garden and using that sculpture garden outside to animate our physical senses, and then talk about designing for XR. So to me, I'm looking at all of these experiences as more of a tribrid, as Kathleen Cohen has said. The tribrid means we're not a hybrid anymore. It's not digital or physical. It's sometimes digital, sometimes physical, and sometimes an intersection of the two where they're overlapping. So playing with that in my mind, how does that feel? Wow. So this learning journey today has been a lot of discovery for me, just feeling the honor of being here, getting to share some ideas about adaptation, about how the brain becomes more fluid, less attached, more plastic. I believe a lot in invitation over prescription. So as I'm thinking about all of this, this is just an invitation for us to explore this and dialogue together. My 3 discoveries that I will share from this journey of these topics is that, again, encouraging our brains to notice and appreciate creates that connection and resilience. We really need time sometimes to slow down, to show up, and to appreciate things, to really drink them in with our senses. Just like I'm appreciating right now all of the people in the space and looking out and really taking in the details. How do we do that? Sometimes for me, it involves photography. I'll go for a walk and just happen to notice something, happen to notice a dandelion, and it made me smile so widely. And, just noticing when the pattern breaks. Sometimes it can involve sketching, being in nature. It can involve some kind of creativity that comes out on impulse. Some people use music as a way to tune their senses, noticing details. Expressive, moving your body, dance, wonderful. Yeah, how can we appreciate that that's part of the practice? Show up and noticing. I would say is part of that adaptive intelligence priming, because when you start to notice details, you start to feel a little more focused. They say flow follows focus. So how can we really show up in the moment and then see that we're not alone, that there's some kind of collective strength here? John Kabat-Zinn has said, you can't stop the waves, you can learn to surf. How do those micro adjustments play out in our life? How can we both take the gravity of the situation and infuse some levity as well? So discovery 2 that I've had about resilience is that plasticity, that possibility, that sense of non-attachment, I think XR can really induce that state. Feeling more curious, less attached. We could have a whole other session about avatars and identities. That would be so exciting, because all of a sudden we become like the beginning identity slide I was showing. We contain multitudes. So we start to see beyond those perceived limits, both in ourselves and in others. And that builds our resilience. Resilience is systemic. It's a social system. It's not an individual. So we start to see, I think as people are putting in the chat so brilliantly, that there's an inner connection and there's also an outer connection that we're forming at the same time. And I start to see myself in other people. I start to see other people, their qualities in me, and also appreciate something that's beyond ourselves. So part of the journey, part of that connection capacity as we head toward distributed networks, whether it's of knowledge, emotion sharing. How does that show up in our world? And how do we give ourselves a little bit of grace when we want things to be a certain way, and then something happens that surprises us. It's different. So I've been embracing that quality too, that I call wabi sabi, the beautiful and the broken. So this beautiful and the broken moment can be how the light gets in, and that quality tends to lead me in creative directions as I start to embrace it even more. So underneath all of this is some of the values I keep of mindfulness, that quality of attention, intention, non-judgment, openness to experience. So the last discovery having to do with creative capacity, the theme of today, is for me about what I've identified as placemaking and sensory sense making. So how are we creating these worlds, these places that are really based on our values? The worlds play out, they invite other people to come in and collaborate. And this is both personal and shared. So I mentioned before a lot of the flow camp journeys that I've been hosting, this idea of having a mindful metaverse based on well-being and wonder and connection, creative capacity. We create spaces and they become places on a map that other people are invited to discover as heroes on the journey. For me, it's all about curiosity. So that's my personal takeaway, that thank goodness there's so much to discover, so much here together that is greater than the sum of the parts. So our curiosity sets the course. And then instead of having a feeling, this is my journal likes to be very playful sometimes. So instead of having this feeling, you can switch to this feeling and it really is something of love when we have that connection. So in sum, I want to leave us with a feeling, however you come to it. It's just an invitation to listen, to use this beautiful next 5 days as an opportunity for reflection and sharing, qualities of presence and social trust, that relational trust that we're all here together because of our shared passions. And as we create these spaces of well-being and real discovery, what does it mean to both appreciate each other and also have a sense of expansion stretching beyond our limits? For me, that's part of the journey and definitely part of the joy. So thank you very much. It's been an honor to speak in front of you today, and we still have time today for questions and inspirations and things that people would want to say from the audience. For me, it's going to be even more of a joy when I'm with you also at the end of the week to celebrate the full arc of this experience. So, thank you, and just celebrating what's about to come. Cheers. Wow, I'm looking at everybody's chats. Thank you so much. Where I get to dance and all of these gestures. Thank you, Jonathan. Wow, and Kristen, and I see so many faces out there. I've seen Keely and Julian. This is so amazing. Looking at everybody, Genevieve. So input, questions. We have plenty of time. It's we have a few minutes, and Jonathan and I are happy to take questions or thoughts or non sequiturs. Everything is welcome.
Anybody have any questions?
And I don't know if I have an ability here to save the chat, but I would love to.
You can double click. If you have a Mac, you can use 2 fingers on the pad. It'll appear transcript copied at the top of the screen.
Beautiful. Thank you. Got it.
That was absolutely profound, meaningful, and right in line with what we would really like, all of this evidence-based research to ultimately mean something. You really helped us highlight some of these end goals. I think that many educators, many of these researchers, many students, just fantastic. Thank you so much, Caitlin. This is great. And I know before the session, I had offered to, go ahead and go through the chat and kind of look through and see if there's questions. But I mean, look at this chat, like absolutely fantastic responses from the audience. So many great things.
I couldn't agree more. It's so wonderful. I've been looking at people's inputs, and it really is. I can tell there are going to be so many dynamic conversations coming from here too. One person had written, let's see, that you like the tribrid experience naming of non-dual, but something that's different. So I put, there's a Medium article that I wrote about tribrid and how it feels in those environments. And that it might not fully answer the question. I think there's a question about coming back in person from Martina. How can these practices become translated from physical to virtual? But I think that the article tries to tease that out a little bit about how both physical inspiration can become virtual, and also some of us are very used right now to connecting in virtual spaces, and we're coming back in person and feeling that adjustment. I don't know if you've ever signed up for a conference and then wondered if the conference is in person or online. Like where are we meeting?
Right.
It's always a funny moment in the brain. Like, do I have to bring my physical body or is my virtual body showing up? And for iLRN, it's exciting because it's a yes and this week.
Yeah, it's a new thing for us. Very, very exciting. And we get the pleasure of, being able to, for us in Vienna, we experience you in the virtual at the beginning of the conference, and then you'll be here at the end of the conference. And that is incredibly special, that you're opening the container to start the conference and then grounding us in the conversations and the amazing presentations throughout this week, and helping us to close and indeed continue things at the end of the conference. So we're very lucky.
I'll take an initiative and ask a question, because I've put my hand up, but I think that Jonathan is not picking it. So can I ask a question?
Absolutely. This is Daphne. Yes.
Yes, this is Daphne. Caitlin, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Many of us in this room are very practical people. So I was thinking, how can we use all these interesting concepts that you presented as guidelines for either creating effective educational environments, or using those guidelines to evaluate the effectiveness of educational spaces?
It's a beautiful question. I'm feeling it deeply because it's very broad. So I would say, when you say evaluations of educational spaces, I've worked on that too and felt, okay, this involves metrics. It involves sometimes a combination of qualitative and quantitative data and feedback. I'd start by wanting to define a little more deeply, is it for a certain size, a certain group of people? Is it for a long-term program, like a year-long classroom environment, or is it for a group of people who are in say a workshop together for short term? Because there are different ways to manage that design and actually talk about the intention. Some of this is in Designing Wonder with actual metrics for how you would go about the designing, and also track yourself, like track your progress and see whether or not something is meeting the outcomes that you've defined as your intention at the beginning. So it's very on point, and actually is part of the work that I'm doing. But I would ask, like, maybe a little mini case study so we could look at what you have in mind specifically.
I mean, yeah, you're right. It could be for a very specific question, very specific session, or it could be for a series of sessions that they could help somebody to cover an entire topic in requiring engagement for a certain period of time. I mean, long period of time. I'm thinking of an academic semester, for example, or something, or it could be just a one session where you bring students in and you create an experience where you expect them to achieve very specific learning outcomes.
Absolutely. So sometimes what I've been involved in has been, say, leading a group. Like, one example is a group of Egyptian, they're archaeologists, and we've been working together on how to increase the sense of collaboration with the work that they're doing with each other. So it's like an in-service training using XR, and also thinking about how they're changing some of their artifacts and the work that they do into learning spaces that can be in virtual worlds. So we have some sessions together that are not in VR, where we're on Zoom and we're sharing ideas and using some different platforms. And then we go into XR, and again, there are social exercises that I'll share, and there's social emotional learning involved. And then the team feels even more connected. So I think that's an example of measures that are very practical, and I could speak more to that with people if they're interested in the methodology. but what it involves is each person recognizing on the team each other's strengths, and then when they see that sort of resilience of the team share, they're able to share more. Let's say in a physical space, we have a design setup where they do some creative exercises, they're thinking beyond, they've been problem solving, and actually said it's more efficient for their team because they get into a playful state, and they also know each other's roles more, so they start to trust each other more than they would have, they said, if they were separated and let's say just communicating over email or some type of written form. So that's one very specific example, and that's a project group that meets, you know, it's a 2-month program together. So that's one example, and I love to work on these elements because underneath it all is that emotional connection and definitely that feeling of curiosity leading the way.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure, we can talk more. I can tell when we're together, we're gonna have a lot to talk about, and certainly if there are more examples that others want to
Absolutely.
hear. Yeah,
Looking forward to see you in Vienna and continuing the discussion. Yeah.
likewise. What I'm gonna do, since I do have so many different examples that go into this very detailed kind of explanation, I'll put my website into the chat, and that way, if people have questions or they want to talk more about design and about some of the flow camp exercises I lead, you can go to that site. You can also go specifically to the VR page. You'll see a page there for VR and experiences, and there's going to be a summer program with flow camp. So if you're interested, you can fill something out and we can have a conversation more deeply about that too. Wow.
Thank you,
And
Caitlin.
reading. Thank you, Jonathan. This is great.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I-
I have one question, if there is a bit of time.
Yeah.
Jonathan and Caitlin,
Sure.
this is, can you hear me?
Yes, Martina, go ahead.
Hello, Caitlin. Thank you so much for this presentation. Had some wonderful inputs, and particularly to my research, which is on creativity in VR. So I would like to ask you in particular about the Discovery 3, where you stated that the creative capacity is about place-making and sensory sense-making, works that invite us to experience wonder flow and creative connection. So my question is that as an artist myself and researcher, I found that creativity most of the time is very much, as you already know, about our senses. So it is mainly, I find it related to how relate to our physical body in our physical world. So how do you find that being translated in virtual world using all the extra media? Because you mentioned sensory sense making. So senses that we can use up to this point, vision. But of course, we are working on more. So what are your thoughts on that, or what is your approach?
Well, I have so many different questions and thoughts that are coming up. Also, your beautiful question, I don't think the audio was doing justice to it because it was cutting in and out a little bit for me. I want to hear if it was cutting in and out for Jonathan.
Yeah, it definitely was cutting in and out for me as well. There was a I'm not sure what that is.
Okay, so I'm still going to take a stab at it though, because I felt what was coming through to me was the friction between physical inspiration for creativity and this idea of sense making and placemaking being multisensory, with a layer of where we're at right now in most of XR possibility that's you were describing as mostly the sensory of sight. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay, so this is really interesting to me because I've been working a lot on voice guidance. So I do sometimes voice guided meditations, different readings. I'm interested in spatialized audio as well. And and different places that bring us into a more creative state of possibility. So I've been researching a little bit, and there's more to share with you, definitely, about spatial audio palaces and places that are places that give us a feeling that we're invited to play the role of a storyteller. And I would say that nature is a part of a lot of the design that I'm building, whether it's in XR, VR, AR, WebXR. It's not just the five senses, but sometimes it's about encouraging people to follow intuition and to make connections. so it's interesting that sometimes people will tell me that just having a feeling of grass in that 3D WebXR space, if we do a focus exercise, they're somehow able to feel the grass against their feet. And that's in surveys coming back from people. It's very interesting to me. I'm part of research that's going into areas of synesthesia and delight. But looking at well-being, what can we do right now with very simple environments that lead people to sometimes fill in the gaps with their own creativity? So I'd love to talk with you more about that research, and also about whether right now there's a possibility to animate that, and again, not to drive us away from appreciating our physical surroundings, but kind of tuning our senses a little bit. And there's also a company that's doing great work with olfactory, with senses of smell, and bringing some of those into the VR experiences. And of course, I just collect a lot of different case studies and see what's happening in these fields that are sometimes still nascent, not yet fully developed. So Martina, if you will be in Vienna, I would love to connect with you in person. Even if you're not in Vienna, let's set up a time and we can share more deeply. Thank you.
Well, I am in Vienna. Thank you for
Oh, good.
answering my question. So I'm very much looking forward to beginning the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thanks so much, everybody.
Caitlin.
Oh, wow. Likewise, it's an honor. I'd love to read more of your research too. I know we're slightly over time, but yet I kind of, you know me, I lose track of time when I'm riding these waves. So I'll let Jonathan tell us when our time is up.
Well, that's dangerous to have
I
me
know.
keep track of time too. So
The two of us on stage.
No
Oh,
one's in
goodness.
control.
We're just surfing. So yeah, I'm looking through all of this. Any last questions for today, or salient points that you feel like you would love to share are welcome for us. We are so happy and grateful to have this after party right now.
I think I do want to respect and make room for the other presentations that are also happening at 8 o'clock Central European time. We have the XR
Yes.
Women presentation, and 3 tracks are happening. The assessment and evaluation track has a session. The galleries, libraries, archives, and museums track, and the research and theory track is open. So I really hope we can continue this conversation. And indeed, as we implied and have intentionally woven this in, we're hoping the Caitlin's conversation and the directionality of this will be woven throughout the conference, through the all iLRN workshop, and concluding with her closing keynote here in Vienna. So if everyone, please feel free to come into the Discord. Caitlin's there on our Discord, and we can continue the conversation there, and let's continue to explore and look at the various lenses that have been sort of uncovered and illuminated today. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jonathan. And if one person doesn't mind taking